There's a peculiar moment, right before the applause dies down, when you realize it wasn't meant to celebrate you. It was meant to mark your exit. That's what struck me hardest in those few seconds, standing center stage of the Langston Grand Hotel, under lights that felt more interrogational than celebratory. The company-wide email had called it a historic day for Stratwell Group. There was even a jazz quartet playing in the corner and an open bar gleaming like a bribe. My name's Ethan Monroe, Senior Account Director at Stratwell. At least, that's what my badge had said that morning. I'd spent the last 9 years grinding in silence. Failed pitches, sacrifice holidays, nights spent in sterile offices chasing dreams that didn't belong to me. But this time, I had landed what others couldn't. A contract with Meridian Equity, a whale client that Stratwell had pursued for over a decade. A projected $420 million in long-term returns. And I was the one who brought it in. So, when they called me to the stage, I let myself feel it for just a flicker. Pride. Relief. That tiny whisper of validation that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. The ballroom was packed. I walked up to the podium as cameras flashed, lights hot on my face. Banners overhead read, Stratwell soars. The CEO, Roland Carter, stood there with a glass trophy already in hand. My name was etched across the base, sharp and clean. He shook my hand, leaned in for a photo op, and while smiling for the crowd, whispered through gritted teeth, "There's a severance letter under your chair. Effective immediately." I didn't flinch. The cameras were still flashing. My smile stayed locked in place like it was chiseled into stone. The applause roared louder. People stood. Some cheered. And all I could hear was that single word reverberating through my skull, severance. I looked down at Roland's polished shoes, then out at the sea of faces. Some of them I had mentored. Others I'd helped hire. None of them knew. Or maybe a few did. Inside me, something cracked. I gripped the trophy tighter, not out of gratitude, but to steady myself, to keep from shaking. They thought this was the end of my story, but they didn't know the fine print. I stood there a moment longer, applause crashing around me like waves in a storm I couldn't feel. My smile didn't move, my face frozen in place, the kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from shock so complete it paralyzes. This wasn't recognition. This wasn't a thank you. This was theater, a stage farewell disguised as celebration. Still gripping the trophy, I stepped toward the microphone. Not because I had something grand to say, but because I owed a thank you to the people who had stood beside me through endless late nights, impossible deadlines, and corporate indifference. I cleared my throat and leaned in. I just want to say, silence. I tapped the mic again. Nothing. I glanced at the tech team in the back. One of them looked up, confused. I tried again. Still nothing. Then smoothly, too smoothly, the MC slid back into place beside me. "Thank you, Ethan, for that inspiring moment." He gestured toward another exec in the wings. "Now, let's welcome our next honoree." The quartet picked up their instruments. The applause resumed. Lighter this time, distracted, and a stage assistant, someone I'd never seen before, gently ushered me off the platform like a child being led out of school play. It took 3 full seconds for the truth to hit me. The mic hadn't failed. They'd cut it. Deliberately. They knew I'd want to speak. And they silenced me before I could. As I walked back to my seat, the smiles around me felt thinner. Some polite. Some stiff. Some avoiding eye contact altogether. My seat was still warm. I slid into it like nothing had happened. I looked under the chair. There it was. A white envelope. No name. No logo. Just the word confidential in bold, cold letters. Before I could even open it, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Morgan Tate, head of HR, standing over me. Her eyes were unreadable. "Ethan, could we speak privately for a moment?" I nodded, still holding the envelope. She led me out of the ballroom and down a quiet hall. Beige carpet, faux plants, a hallway that screamed corporate comfort, masking corporate cruelty. We entered a glass-walled conference room, and she closed the door gently behind us. "We had planned to have this conversation after the ceremony," she began, sitting across from me. "But given the timing, we felt it best to be direct." She slid a document across the table. The same document, I was sure, that sat unopened in the envelope clutched in my hand. due to leadership restructuring and budget alignment. Your position is being dissolved, effective immediately. A severance package has been prepared. I didn't speak. I just stared. I had brought in the deal that saved their quarter. That saved Roland's reputation. And now, during my own standing ovation, they were cutting me loose like yesterday's headline. The applause still echoed faintly in my ears. Only now it sounded like laughter. The highway was nearly empty, just the hum of my tires on concrete and the quiet rhythm of thoughts that refused to settle. It was almost midnight when I reached the overlook. San Francisco lay across the water like a painting, serene, detached, indifferent. The Golden Gate Bridge stretched out in front of me, wrapped in fog, its red steel disappearing into gray. A kind of poetry, I thought. Something permanent surrounded by something always changing. I parked in the lot near Battery Spencer and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit like a slap, bracing, unapologetic. I pulled my coat tighter and made my way along the gravel path to the bench. My bench, worn wood, warped slightly by rain and time, tucked behind a cypress tree, leaning into the wind like it knew better than to stand up straight in this world. I had come here before, during rough quarters, personal disasters, the quiet kind of failures no one applauds or even sees. And now again, but this time felt different. This time wasn't sadness. It was something closer to clarity, sharpened by betrayal. I sat down slowly, the weight of the trophy still in my hand. I hadn't let go of it yet. Part of me didn't want to. Not because it meant something, but because it reminded me of the lie I'd been sold, and the one I almost believed. I stared out over the bay. The water reflected the city lights in trembling gold streaks. Somewhere behind me, the ceremony had ended. Somewhere, Roland Carter was drinking his third scotch, pretending his empire hadn't just made its most expensive mistake. My mind wouldn't stop replaying it. Roland's whisper, the silent mic, Morgan's carefully neutral tone. But beneath all the noise, a single thread kept rising. A sentence, faint but growing louder each time it returned. Clause 18b. It had been a non-negotiable during the Meridian deal. I remembered that meeting vividly. Paul Whitaker, their managing partner, had sat across from me in a downtown office with a view of the marina. No deal, he said, unless Ethan Monroe is the one overseeing it directly. We're not signing with Stratwell. We're signing with you. So I had insisted. I'd worked with our legal team to add it. All strategic account direction and oversight must be conducted by Ethan Monroe. In the event he is no longer acting in this role, the agreement is subject to immediate review and potential nullification. Simple, clear, binding. It wasn't just formality, it was insurance. For them. And it turned out for me. Back then, I hadn't thought I'd need it. Back then, I was loyal. Stupidly loyal. But now, sitting in the wind with that clause burning in my memory like a flare, I saw it for what it was, a key. And Stratwell had just handed it to me by firing the one person the contract couldn't function without. I reached into my coat pocket. The copy of the agreement was still there. Folded, slightly creased, but intact. I unfolded it with numb fingers and flipped to the right page. There it was. My name in black ink. My authority in writing. My leverage. They hadn't just fired me. They'd jeopardized the biggest deal their company had landed in a decade. And I was the only one who could stop it from unraveling. The fog around the bridge thickened, curling like smoke around the steel beams. I stared out at it and realized something strange. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel bitter. I felt ready, not for revenge, not for fight, but for something I hadn't felt in years. Movement, direction, control. All those late nights, missed holidays, compromises I'd swallowed for the team, they hadn't been for nothing. They had been preparation. And now it was time to act. I stood up, tucked the contract back into my coat, and took one last look at the city across the water. Then I turned and walked back toward my car, my breath steady in the cold night air. This wasn't the end of my story. It wasn't even the middle. This was the chapter where the hero gets blindsided and walks away bleeding, but smiling. Because he knows something the villains don't. Tomorrow morning, I'd make the call, and everything would change. Sleep never came. Not really. I lay in bed with the lights off and the contract still open on my laptop, the cold glow of the screen illuminating the silence around me. Clause 18b. I must have read it 20 times. Every word felt like a promise someone else had forgotten, but I had not. It wasn't a legal technicality. It was a loaded gun, one Stratwell themselves had handed me, chambered, and then turned their back on. At 4:47 a.m., I gave up trying to rest. I got out of bed, still in yesterday's clothes, and walked into the kitchen. The trophy sat on the counter, still gleaming under the dim light above the stove. I ran a hand across the etched glass, then picked it up and placed it gently in the trash. That was the first moment I smiled. By 5 a.m., my apartment was quiet but alive. Papers out, folders open, emails pulled up. I moved through everything like muscle memory, fast but focused. Every version of the contract, the final signed PDF, the email chain confirming delivery, the oversight clause, annotated and bolded. And most important, the clear fact that not a single Stratwell executive had been CC'd on the final exchange with Meridian's team. Just me and Paul Whitaker. That was no accident. Paul was deliberate like that. A former litigator turned financier. He didn't like clutter, especially in deals. When he said Meridian signed with me, he meant it. They didn't trust logos. They trusted people. And Stratwell just fired the one person they built the trust on. At 6:12 a.m., I opened a new browser tab and typed 3 words into the domain search bar. Monroe Advisory Group. The name felt too sterile, too detached. I tried something else. Monroe and Company. Still didn't feel right. Then I remembered something. My grandfather, Albert Monroe. He'd been a builder in Pittsburgh, back in the days when you could measure a man by how many roofs he'd raised. The plaque on his office door had read, Monroe Consulting, no slogan, no fluff. Just a name that meant something. I liked that. So I typed, Monroe Strategic. Available. At 6:38 a.m., the domain was mine. The LLC paperwork filed. EIN generated. Business bank account application submitted. I created a Gmail, a basic landing page with a single sentence. Real strategy. Real results. Then I took a breath, stood up, and pulled the black suit from the back of my closet. Not navy. Not gray. Black. No tie. Just a white dress shirt, black belt, polished shoes. Simple. Quiet. Sharp. At 7:02 a.m., I stepped out the door, folder in hand, wind cool on my face. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post on LinkedIn. This wasn't a moment for performance. This was a moment for execution. By 7:28, I was in the lobby of the Lexington Meridian Hotel, the kind of place where leather and marble whisper money. I spotted Paul Whitaker in the atrium, gray suit, no tie, reading something on his tablet with that signature stillness of his. Not rushed, not reactive, just focused. He looked up, saw me, nodded once. "Ethan," he said, "upstairs." No pleasantries, no handshake, just motion. We rode the elevator to the 25th floor. The suite had a skyline view, coffee already brewed, and 2 chairs facing each other with a table in between. I handed him the folder. Inside, a certified copy of the Meridian contract, my severance notice, a transition plan for the account under Monroe Strategic, and proof of legal business formation. Paul didn't speak for 5 minutes. He just read, page after page. Then finally, he looked up. "You move fast." "You taught me that," I said. He leaned back. "The CRM tools? The dashboards? Are they yours?" I nodded. Custom built. Independent clauses filed outside Stratwell systems. They don't own the IP. I do. His assistant, who had been standing silently in the corner, gave a small, approving nod. Paul didn't blink. "If Meridian transitions under your banner, can you handle it?" "I already am. Same strategic leadership. Same continuity. No disruption. The only thing that changes is the logo." He set the folder down, folded his hands, and let out a small breath. "We'll move it under you, provided the handoff is clean." I opened my mouth to thank him, but he held up a finger. "One more thing," he said. "I've got 4 other accounts looking to distance themselves from Stratwell. Quietly. If I bring them your way, can you absorb them?" I didn't hesitate. If I can build them, I can carry them. Paul smiled just barely. "Then let's draft the paperwork today." He stood. I followed. And as we shook hands, he added with a trace of humor in his voice, "Roland is going to lose his mind." I I smiled for the first real time in 2 days. He should. And with that, I walked out of the hotel not reemployed, not rescued, reclaimed. I didn't go home after the meeting. There was too much energy running through me, too much clarity. So instead, I found a quiet corner in a second-floor cafe off Market Street. The kind with weak espresso, wobbly tables, and a password taped to the register. The kind of place where dreams usually die in overpitched decks. But for me, it felt like neutral ground. No memory of Stratwell, no ghosts of boardrooms or bad bosses. I took out my laptop, slid into a booth by the window, and whispered to myself, let's build. The first step was naming it out loud. Monroe Strategic. I said it under my breath like a test drive. It felt grounded, serious, like something that would still mean something 10 years from now. I filed the incorporation documents properly, state registration, tax ID, operating agreement. Then I registered the domain, drafted a one-page website using a template. White background, navy serif font, one clean tagline. Strategy rooted in integrity. Execution without noise. I didn't need flashy. I needed real. By 1:15 p.m., the LinkedIn update was live. No drama, just a line that read, after nearly a decade at Stratwell Group, I'm starting something new. Monroe Strategic is open for business. No mention of betrayal. No shots fired. Just presence. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to Camille Reyes, a data analyst who had once quietly rebuilt Stratwell's forecasting tools after a senior director failed upward. She was let go during the last optimization round because she didn't speak up enough in meetings. I knew better. Camille didn't speak up because she didn't need to. Her work spoke for itself. She answered on the second ring. Ethan? Oh my God, I just saw your post. Tell me you're hiring. I'm building. Want in. You serious? Fully. I'm in. I've been in since they canned me for doing my job too well. The second call was to Devin Shaw, one of the sharpest creative strategists I'd ever met. Brilliant, slightly chaotic, always 10 steps ahead of brand trends. Stratwell had fired him for being culturally disruptive, which was code for too honest. When I explained the vision, there was a pause on the other end. I've been waiting for this call, he said. Let's wreck the right things and build the right way. By 3 p.m., our Slack workspace was live. I created channels labeled #ops, #clients, #intel, #reclamation. Camille uploaded early retention models. Devin dropped a mood board with brand palettes and a pitch deck framework titled Smart, Small, Strategic. It wasn't perfect, but it was moving. It was ours. At 4:37 p.m., I got an email. Subject, checking in. From Allison Grant, CMO, Kinetics Health. She was a legacy client, one of Stratwell's crown jewels. I closed the account 3 years ago and built the entire comm system they now depended on. The email was short. Saw your update. I'm not surprised how it ended. I'm surprised it took this long. Are you taking on clients? Because I'm looking to move. Quietly, I stared at her name for a moment, feeling the weight of that sentence settle. I didn't need to chase Stratwell's accounts. They were already coming to me. By early evening, Camille had built out a full client scoring matrix, and Devin uploaded our visual guidelines. Our systems were live, scrappy, but scalable. Our message was simple. We don't sell dreams. We deliver plans. We weren't born from bitterness. We were forged in it, but built on something else. Something steadier. By the time I shut the laptop, the sun was dipping low, casting gold across the city skyline. I sat back and realized something that made me breathe easier than I had in weeks. I wasn't rebuilding a broken past. I was building something new, something no one could take from me, something made of bricks, not ashes. And for the first time since that staged applause, I felt it, true forward motion. No noise, no permission needed, just quiet power. The morning after Monroe Strategic quietly launched, Stratwell's headquarters was already humming, but not the usual kind of Monday buzz. It wasn't the energy of anticipation or productivity. It was the tension you feel when something has gone wrong and no one wants to say it out loud yet. Phones rang a little too long before being answered. Department heads walked faster, their voices lower. People smiled like they were practicing, not feeling. At 9:12 a.m., A mid-level project manager named Julia Carter knocked on Roland Carter's door. Yes, his niece, which is probably the only reason she still had nerve. "Roland," she said, holding her tablet awkwardly, "we can't access the Meridian client portal." He barely looked up. IT issue. Escalated. But it wasn't just Meridian. By 10:05 a.m., 3 more team leads reported issues. Not just login failures, but blank dashboards. Forecasting tools with no data. Systems erroring out. Stratwell's entire analytics layer, the one I built, was fracturing in real time. It wasn't sabotage. It was entropy. They didn't know how to operate the machine I designed. And they never bothered to learn. By 10:37 a.m., a message hit the internal legal channel. Subject line, Clause 18B, urgent review required. At 11:05, Allison Grant, yes, the same CMO from Kinetics Health, called Stratwell's front desk. She asked to speak to me. When told I was no longer with the company, her tone reportedly turned to steel. Then connect me to whoever decided to terminate the strategist managing our $60 million campaign. They routed her to legal. She didn't call back. At 11:42 a.m., another client, Marco from Trenwell Capital, contacted the sales team. "We're pausing the contract until Ethan Monroe gets back to us. He's the only one who ever understood our systems." That was the moment Roland started calling people. First his chief of operations, then legal, then the board liaison. I know because someone from inside sent me screenshots of the meeting invites. Emergency sessions. Red font. No agenda listed. Just status review. I didn't respond to any of it. No calls. No emails. Not even the desperate, "Can we talk?" message from Morgan in HR. At 12:15 p.m., I sat in my new co-working space, bare concrete floors, loud pipes, real sunlight, watching my inbox fill. Not with apologies, not with blame, but with requests, inquiries, respect. At 12:58 p.m., my former intern from Stratwell, Tara, sent me a Slack DM that simply read, "They're falling apart without you. It's chaos in the glass rooms." I didn't reply, because I didn't need to. That afternoon, Stratwell's general counsel confirmed what Roland had feared. Clause 18B was airtight. The oversight clause hadn't been boilerplate. It had been binding, and I was the only name on it. At 2:17 p.m., Roland Carter placed a call to Paul Whitaker at Meridian Equity. Paul's response, according to someone listening in, was short. "You fire the condition. The deal dies with him." Then he hung up, not with anger, with certainty, the kind of certainty that doesn't beg. At 2:46 p.m., a notice was posted internally. Access to Ethan Monroe, built systems to be restricted pending audit. But it was too late. There was nothing left to audit. Without daily calibration, the kind only I knew how to maintain, the system was unraveling. Not with an explosion, with a quiet, calculated breakdown. At 3:12 p.m., I got a message from Max Templeton, one of the old developers who had been laid off 6 months earlier. Brilliant guy, always quiet, always watching. He wrote, "Ethan, I still have backdoor access to the infrastructure. Built a fail-safe script when they asked me to replicate your tools without your input. Wanting to flip the switch. One click and their CRM freezes solid." I stared at the message for a long time, and then I typed back, "Don't do it. Let them collapse on their own. Their failure should be earned, not hacked." He replied 2 words, "Respect, man." That night, I stood at my window with a glass of cold water and no music playing. Just silence. Clean, complete, earned silence. And then, like it was answering my thoughts, a notification popped up on my phone. Dinix CRM, Tier 2 degradation alert. Data parsing failure. Client form rendering error. I didn't touch a thing, and yet they were breaking. Because I wasn't there to hold it together. Because they never bothered to understand the system, only to control the person who built it. And I had walked away, not in anger, not in fear, but in full control. By the time I poured my second cup of coffee the next morning, the ripple had become a wave. Stratwell's internal systems were limping. Clients weren't responding. And on my end, Monroe Strategic was alive, small, agile, and suddenly surrounded by the kind of attention I hadn't asked for, but had clearly earned. At 9:41 a.m., the markets opened, At 9:58 a.m., Stratwell stock dropped 11.4%. By 10:15, it hit 16%, the steepest single-day dip in nearly 4 years. I didn't need to watch it happen. I already knew what was coming. Still, I found myself hovering over the financial news tab on my screen. Not to gloat, just to confirm the truth. I'd always known deep down that when you subtract value, you subtract support. Headlines rolled in like drumbeats. Stratwell faces strategic collapse after high-profile departures. Key clients quietly exit after leadership shakeup. Who is Ethan Monroe, and why did his exit break the system? That last one made me pause, not because of the flattery, but because of the phrasing. Who is Ethan Monroe? I wasn't gone. I wasn't a ghost. I was right here, just not answering to them anymore. I wasn't the brand they tried to own. I was the one who had built what the brand was standing on. They just didn't realize that until they were already falling. At 10:42 a.m., I received an email from a senior finance reporter at the Ledger Weekly. Her name was Tasha Riley. I remembered her from an old PR campaign Stratwell had tried to spin 3 years ago. She had seen through it then. Now, her subject line was simple, quiet interview request, off the record. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Camille with a note. We don't chase the narrative. We build one. Camille replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Devin followed with a quick update to our LinkedIn header. We're not just surviving. We're advancing. By 12 p.m., we had signed our third client. It wasn't some grand celebration. No balloons. No launch party. Just a shared document in our Slack titled Win Number 3. A clean signature page. A transfer checklist. A message from the client that simply said, "We've been waiting for someone like you." And then something unexpected happened. At 12:23 p.m., my inbox lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 3 years, Elliot Trammell. He used to be the senior VP at Stratwell. He once called me the spreadsheet whisperer during a meeting and laughed like it was the cleverest insult of the year. Always interrupted me in presentations. Always managed to make my ideas sound like his by the time the slides reached the board. The subject line of his email read, "Checking in." I opened it. The message was short. "Ethan, looks like you're doing well. I'm sure you're hearing this a lot, but things over here have shifted quickly. I've submitted my resignation this morning. Curious if you've got room for someone with deep enterprise knowledge and an open mind. No ego, just admiration." I didn't need to write a long reply. I didn't need to remind him of who I was. His email was already a confession. I simply forwarded it to Camille and typed 3 words underneath. What a turn. She responded with a single line that stayed with me the rest of the day. When the lights go out, people remember who held the matches. That evening, I walked through downtown alone. No noise in my ears. No podcast. No playlist. Just the sound of traffic, the hum of the city, and the echo of doors I used to knock on, now swinging open before I even reached them. I passed by Stratwell's old office. Not intentionally. It was just muscle memory. The lobby lights were still on, but the executive floor, 22nd, was dark. A screen in the foyer flickered with an error message. Someone from maintenance stood nearby, poking it with a stylus, muttering under his breath. I paused at the crosswalk, hands in my coat pockets. Just then, I saw 2 figures walk out of the revolving doors. Tara, head of PR, and Malik, former operations chief, both carrying boxes. They didn't see me. Tara looked stiff, her jaw clenched. Malik's shoulders sagged like the box he carried weighed more than it did. It wasn't a poetic sight. It was just real. The light turned green. I crossed the street, not smiling, not slowing down, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance being restored. One resignation, one unanswered email, one client at a time, and I was no longer walking toward something. I was already there. 3 weeks after the Meridian account formally transitioned to Monroe Strategic, I found myself standing in the corner of a modest ballroom in Chicago. No spotlights, no velvet rope, no name tags with gold trim, just folding chairs, a flimsy podium, and the faint smell of industrial carpet cleaner. I hadn't come to be celebrated. I wasn't the keynote. I wasn't even on the main stage. I had been asked to speak on a breakout panel at the Midwest Leadership Forum, specifically the one titled Ethics and Exit Strategies. Low profile, off the record, exactly how I liked it. And yet, when I stepped into the room, it was full. Overfilled, actually. People leaned against the walls, sat on windowsills, even stood in the back with arms crossed. Not defensively, but attentively. Most were mid-level strategists, newly minted consultants, or startup founders who still smelled of ambition and caffeine. All of them curious. All of them alert. I adjusted the mic and looked out over the faces. Then I began, not with slides or small talk, but with the truth. 3 weeks ago, I said, I was fired at my own promotion ceremony. A few heads tilted. Some pens stopped mid-scribble. Not for underperformance. Not for misconduct. But after landing the biggest client in my company's history. They handed me a trophy and a severance envelope within 60 seconds. A quiet murmur rippled through the room. I didn't go public. I didn't post screenshots or leak documents. What I did instead was remember who I was when no one was clapping. That line, when no one was clapping, landed harder than I expected. I saw in their posture, in the way several attendees sat up straighter, almost like they'd been holding in breath they didn't know they needed to release. I kept going, voice steady. I launched my own firm within 72 hours. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because the client didn't choose a logo. They chose me. Someone near the front whispered, "Damn right." I cracked a slight smile. Leadership isn't just what you do when things go well, I continued. It's how you respond when the lights go out, when you're cut out, when your name gets deleted from the chain. In the third row, I saw Camille. She didn't take notes. She didn't need to. She had lived it. Devin stood in the back, phone in hand, filming a 15-second clip to post later, probably with some brutally clean caption like, "Lead, don't linger." But one face in the audience pulled me back for a beat. Far back, near the corner, Ariana Brooks. She had been an intern at Stratwell during the Meridian deal. I remembered her watching me get escorted out that day, clutching a file folder with my name still on it. Now, she sat with a small laptop open, typing furiously. Not scrolling, not distracted, focused, learning. I caught her eye briefly. She didn't flinch. She nodded. That nod, that simple, quiet acknowledgement, meant more than the applause that followed when I wrapped up my final thought. Ethics isn't about being nice. It's about being non-negotiable. It's about the lines you won't cross, even when no one's watching. Especially then. When I stepped off the stage, there was no rush, no mob of followers. Just people, real ones, stepping forward not to congratulate, but to thank. You gave me permission to walk away. I've been afraid of losing my job. Now I'm afraid of staying silent. This makes me want to rewrite how I lead. And just before I left the room, I felt a gentle tap on my arm. I turned. It was Ariana. Her voice was firmer now, less timid than the last time I heard it. "Mr. Monroe," she said, "do you need a research assistant?" I smiled, small and real. I might. That night, I walked alone along the riverfront, the wind cutting across the water, the city lights smudging the sky. No champagne, no cameras, just the sound of footsteps and the certainty that I wasn't running anymore. I hadn't reclaimed the platform they stripped from me. I'd built my own. 3 days after the conference, I was back in our co-working space. Bare brick walls, mismatched chairs, the sound of someone's Bluetooth speaker quietly playing Miles Davis in the background. The room smelled like coffee that had been reheated too many times and whiteboard markers that had lived past their prime. But we were building. Devin was sketching out a pitch deck for our fourth client. Camille was reviewing forecasting models with a precision that could make a CFO weep. Ariana, who started that Monday, was already elbow deep in competitive research and asking the kind of questions I hadn't heard since my first year in the industry. It didn't feel like a startup. It felt like a command center. At 11:47 a.m., I got an alert on my phone. I glanced down, expecting another calendar ping or Slack notification. Stratwell Group Incorporated. Stock, down 19.3%. Ongoing client attrition and investor uncertainty. No shock, no smirk, just a quiet confirmation of what I'd known since that morning on the Golden Gate Overlook. A structure built on exploitation can only lean so long before it tips. And the foundation had cracked the second they thought a name on a contract mattered more than the person behind it. Camille looked up from her screen. Did you hear? I already knew what she meant, but I raised an eyebrow anyway. Stratwell just lost Halverson equity. They pulled all capital within 30 days. I blinked. You're sure? She turned her laptop toward me. A breaking news article. Headline: Major investor withdraws from Stratwell following executive exodus. My phone buzzed again. A text from Paul Whitaker told them the truth. Halverson didn't invest in logos. They invested in people. And Stratwell burned the wrong one. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Somewhere downtown, a boardroom was probably filling with blame and desperation. Lawyers pulling contracts under magnifying glasses. PR trying to draft statements without using the word crisis. Roland Carter pacing the length of a glass office he once ruled from, now watching it fracture from the inside out. And me? I was in a hoodie, drinking bad coffee, leading a team of 4 who operated with more honesty and sharpness than entire departments I used to sit in. At 2:02 p.m., an email arrived from another legacy client. This one from Voxen Analytics, a company I had helped land and build systems for back in my second year at Stratwell. Heard about Monroe Strategic. If you're taking on new accounts, we're ready to move. Quietly, cleanly. Devin saw the name pop up on our CRM and let out a soft whistle. That's number 5. I just nodded. We weren't chasing. We were attracting. That evening, I walked home alone, passing by buildings I used to imagine working in. Towers of glass where I once thought prestige lived. Now, they look hollow, too tall, too proud. I stopped at a corner bookstore, my usual place to reset, and bought a notebook. Not for planning, for remembering. Not what had happened, but why. When I got home, I opened a fresh page and wrote the words. Build from clarity, led without needing noise, and never, ever mistake applause for loyalty. The next morning, we onboard 2 new clients. No speeches, no press. Just seamless handoffs, signed contracts, and the kind of relief in their emails that said, finally, someone who listens. And still, Stratwell crumbled. Not because I struck back, but because they never thought someone like me would have the patience to outlast them. I didn't need their building. I'd already built my own. And this time, I wasn't just holding the keys. I was drawing the blueprint. It was a Thursday afternoon when I signed the contract that changed everything. Not because of the dollar amount or the brand name or the prestige tied to it, but because it was the first time I'd ever signed a deal as fully myself. No proxy, no brand behind me. Just Ethan Monroe, founder of Monroe Strategic, with nothing but my own integrity behind the signature. We closed our 6th account that day. I didn't post about it, didn't issue a press release, didn't even email Paul Whitaker. Instead, I poured a glass of water, walked over to the large window of our shared workspace, and just looked out. Not up, not back, just out. Onto a street I'd once walked with my head down, wondering if I'd ever be more than a name on someone else's success story. Now I didn't just have a name. I had a voice, a system, a standard, and a team that believed not because I demanded loyalty, but because I'd earned trust. Ariana passed me on the way to the kitchenette, earbuds in, typing something into her iPad with fierce focus. Camille was building out a predictive tool for client churn in the corner. Devin was laughing into a Zoom call, probably disarming some skeptical CMO in 5 seconds flat. And none of it was loud. None of it was forced. It just was. That night, I walked past Stratwell's tower again, this time on purpose. The lobby was lit, but dimmer. Security guard looked half asleep. The reception screen, the same one that used to flash my name in meeting schedules, was frozen, pixelated. No motion, no meaning. And for a brief moment, I stopped in front of the glass doors and looked at my own reflection. Same face, same eyes, but something was different. Not louder, just clearer. A man who used to sit behind conference tables now stood in front of the people who actually moved the needle. A strategist who no longer needed to be heard in meetings, because his silence had already spoken volumes. I didn't need closure. The story didn't need a revenge ending. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you could do isn't fight back. It's rise higher, so they can't reach you even if they tried. I didn't leave flowers on the doorstep. I didn't leave a note. I just walked away one last time. And when I got home, I opened my notebook and wrote the final entry of that chapter. I was never a cog. I was never a number. I was the blueprint. And now, I own the pen. I built my own. If Holly's story reminded you that dignity still has power, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the sharpest truth.